The fact that a large chunk of the society, and I would look at it as a global society, not just the United States, which is where I am, is afraid right now because of the political situation and instability in the world is a massive opportunity for entrepreneurs who are aware of what's going on and know how to liberate themselves from being stuck in the debate. And it's not about not caring. It's not about not being involved. It's not about not having a perspective. It's about not being confused by people who are confused. One of the secrets I found for me with entrepreneur success is don't let the society's confusion become my confusion. And the way to elevate our game as entrepreneurs to make the impact that we want to make wherever we want to make it is not to allow an uninformed past become our uninformed present. And the reason I find for me goes into a state of mind where I believe things that aren't true. I let myself believe things that aren't true. And that takes me away from my inner entrepreneur. When my inner entrepreneur opens up, I'm fine because I'm living in the future I'm creating all the time, but right in the present moment, of course, because I'm taking action in the marketplace in the present moment as I'm noticing what I see going on and what's next. Those are called black swans, the unexpected events that are obvious in hindsight. And they're not black swans to entrepreneurs. They're sometimes surprises. And there's a looking back and saying, oh, that's how I got there. But I knew that was going to happen. I just didn't know when or how or if it was going to work. What I was doing was going to work. But I just knew it's shifting. I know it's shifting. Some people just know it's shifting. Um, and the best situations are those of chaos in the society where more people are confused and you're not. You're not confused as an entrepreneur. Now, back in Reagan era Washington, D.C., I parachuted myself behind enemy lines into George Washington University as a sophomore transfer student. And knowing how this confusion formed, which is kind of a lot of then is when it formed. All the confusion we have now in the political debate and the political divide that's giving us entrepreneurs a big opportunity to sidestep it formed then. And I'm right in the middle of it as a potential victim of its opinions. And I was a victim of its opinions. And then it took a while. And then I freed myself from those belief systems. And that led to feeling frustrated because it was hard to have conversations with people sometimes because they would dump their belief system on me. And I could hear the whole belief system. And I'm thinking, I already know all that. And you just believe it. And it doesn't make any sense. It's not what's actually happening. Um, and I didn't understand this as being an entrepreneur, which is someone who can look forward into the creative ecosystem. And because the creative ecosystem now is global, not just domestic, because the world's globalized, we are all in the same one because we're living in the same world together online and reading the same stuff and hearing the same things and picking up on the same energetic connections and communications and all these things that are going on. When you stay there and you're in that creative intelligence of the future, at least for me, I'm good. That's a prosperity strategy, I call it. So I feel a sense of prosperity. So the meeting today, so if you're in the Entrepreneur Experience campus or coming today or you have a guest pass, what we're going to work on is this. So the action library approach, which is one of the rooms that I'll host today. And if you go to the events page, which is the links up on the site here, redpillpathway.com/events, just claim a guest pass and you can join us. And what we're going to work on is really understanding where your specific opportunity is, because there's the zeitgeist opportunity of where things are going. in your market, and then there's your specific lane that you want to carve out within that market to ride the wave that everyone who's going to succeed with what's coming and what's next, the black swans, is playing in that creative energy of what's next. When I was in DC, I got parachuted in basically to a dorm called Thurston Hall. And that was the freshman dorm. So it was the freshman dorm with some sophomores who hadn't quite found their way out. So I'm a freshman sophomore, really. And I was an alien in the culture, an alien. It's like they spoke Swahili and I spoke Portuguese. It was that dramatic. So this is DC, Washington, DC, during Reagan. And I grew up basically uh, in a totally different world in Chicago area, in Deerfield, which is a suburb of Chicago. And it was very different back then. And it was not sophisticated. It was not sophisticated. It was not um, it was totally different, totally different, totally. We never thought or talked about any of these kind of things. We just did our thing. And for me, it was, going to a Black Sabbath concert, and I was a busboy and a dishwasher at a steakhouse. So I had money to buy drugs when I was in high school, and then cleaned myself up. Sort of flunked out. I stopped going because I couldn't figure out how to register for high school with my buddy. And we're true stoned. We bought all this acid and we couldn't figure out how the registration worked for junior year. So we stopped going. So I didn't go to high school for a week, and then I collapsed and I ended up in a psychiatric hospital. And they're like, well, this kid needs to be in NA, which is called Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous. We got to send him somewhere. Like, we don't know if he's got a drug problem or not, but something's got to happen because he can't get out of bed. So I'm in this place for a little while. Funny, the guy who dropped out of high school with me basically ended up in the same facility as I was leaving. And then we became friends again, where we were attending AA club, Alcoholics Anonymous club, called the Day by Day Club in Highland Park. So that's the same Highland Park where the shooting happened. So I have very deep ties into that community through family that owned a store there called Fell Company. So I know that community really well. I was there almost every day because I went to AA meetings every day for years, 17 to 24. Now, I'm not an alcoholic or a drug addict, but I learned a lot being in those meetings. It became very important because I was freed from the structures of thought and the belief systems of all the hierarchical roles because I couldn't figure out how to get into any of them. And that's the point as an entrepreneur, is not to be in those hierarchies mentally or emotionally, not to be attached to those belief systems that the people in the bubbles, I call it the matrix, in the matrix have created. And that's the whole world in global society too. But then you can boil it down, boil it down, boil it down into specific markets. So I'm in Washington, D.C., and I'm living in a dorm room. So I went to a junior college, College Lake County, and then I worked my way up and barely. And I'm working on bagging groceries at grocery stores. I worked at McDonald's. I stocked diapers at Kmart. Like, I did all these jobs so I could buy drugs, but then I did jobs to get out later. Now, it's not like my family didn't have any money. It's just that, you can only steal so many 20s from dad. I confessed it. So I need cash. I need cash. I want to go skiing. I want to do these things. I want to go to college now. I want to be able to buy stuff. So I'm working. I'm making money. I'm doing okay. And I'm going to AA. So I had friends now, all, like we would sit in a room and actually talk about what was going on with our lives. That wasn't going on in the high school. So I was introduced to that early, and no one had a belief system that dominated the room. Now, sometimes there was an AA groupthink that happened, and there were some weird factions in the group. There was one faction that believed in depression. So they misinterpreted the idea of having a pain emotional experience and being negative all the time. And they had a guru that led it, this guy named Todd. Not my boss Todd from later when I worked in marketing communications, a different Todd. And he had acolytes that followed him around, and we laughed at it because it was like, oh, that's Todd's group. They don't get it. So I didn't get sucked up into that, luckily, because negative thinking and indulging it is not, that's called wound worshiping in these kinds of groups. Or it's called connecting to your truth for people who don't understand how pain experience and release works. That was what was going on. So I don't want to get too off track, but so in DC with Reagan, there's all these belief systems floating into the city big time because everything had changed. So we'd been in the 70s with Carter and before that Nixon. So they were trying to control the economy from Washington, DC. It's not going to work. So Nixon had wage and price controls, and they were trying to figure out how to make it work. And then inflation's out of control, and Carter loses office, and you had the Iran hostage crisis, which was cool to watch. I watched Ted Koppel when I was a kid on Nightline, and I was like, it was like a drama. Like, are they ever going to get released? And is Carter going to pull it off? And no, no, they didn't let him. Iranians didn't let. I don't know what happened, but they didn't let him get that victory. So Reagan gets elected, and it's a movement election because Reagan was an entrepreneur. He could see what was next. He saw, like, the governments at this moment. Now, forget the belief systems. We're going to get into this in a minute and why this is important for entrepreneurs. So what Reagan realized was the government's the problem. Now, he had his own belief system. And the Reaganites, the neoconservatives, I guess they were called, who followed him, adopted him as the guru leader of the belief system. So they constructed and architected in think tanks and magazine, journals and in their own discussions and debates and intellectual, they called it the chattering class at the time, to understand it. And then they had social scientists looking at these things, what's going on. And what Reagan got was the shining city on the hill. Okay, we're going to get into progress and conserve in a minute in politics. The progress and conserve, progressives and conservatives. It's always existed. It's important that you have both of those sides functioning freely. So Reagan, the conservative, is the progressive in terms of the energy of progress, because he was trying to free the economy from stagflation, too much inflation and no growth. And there's only one way to do that, they figured out, is to crush it. So Paul Volcker comes in and Reagan's like, let's do it. And they let interest rates find their own level. Or I guess I don't know exactly how the Fed works, but interest rates spiked. Well, then the economy tanks. So I'm at the Day by Day Club in Highland Park, and everybody's like, oh my God, the economy. Oh my God, the economy. Oh my God, Larry, what are you going to do? You're never going to get a job. The economy. So there's their confusion, right? So I got sucked up into their confusion for a little while. And then I think I realized, no, this is kind of interesting. So instead of being attached to the beliefs around, oh my God, the interest rates, and I could look around and say, what do I want in my life? Which was to go to DC. I didn't want to go to school in DC or New York. I wanted out of the Midwest. I wanted to be a cool guy on the coast. And I like the East Coast. So it's like DC, New York. I want to get in one of these fancy careers, investment banking. Maybe I could be a foreign service officer. Maybe I could be some kind of I didn't know. I'm like, but I'm going. So I'm out of the, oh, can't work. Oh my God, it's terrible. I'm an entrepreneur now in my own life. See, these are just, I'm explaining this just as principles. So I'll go back to my topic here. So entrepreneurs in politics, here's what's coming, how what's coming will elevate our game. I noticed what was coming, which was a new economy, a new society, and new things happening in DC and New York, because all of a sudden the investment banking industry is taking off. And I saw all this. I didn't understand it, but I'm like, oh, I want to go there. How what's coming will elevate our game. The world notices details that never matter. The details was, when's the recession going to end? Is it going to not end? When's it? How? Conservative versus progressive. Oh, what about Reagan and this and that? It's all bullshit. The reasons why the past will continue informs a conversation between those with uninformed opinions. So they're continuing the past The chatter in class debate about the crisis is continuing the crisis, but it doesn't continue because the entrepreneurs and people who see ahead are already doing what's next. It just hasn't gotten fully into the society yet, but it started. And that's what was going on in DC. So I'm there, and it was Reagan, Reagan, Reagan everywhere I looked. It was like a Trump, it was like being in Mississippi with Trump. There's you're not gonna find a Hillary Clinton, yard sign in Alabama or North Dakota or somewhere. They'd shoot you or burn a cross on your lawn. It was like that. And I'm like, I don't like Reagan. Belief. So I get attached to the belief. Well, it was a value too. Values are beliefs. So they can change. So my value was, what about the people? What about the minorities? What about AIDS? What about women? What does the United States have to crush other countries? Like, it just a lot of it was like, but I'm young and naive at the same time. But I'm trying to figure it out. So I'm thinking like an entrepreneur. Like, what do I think? What do I believe? No one that's not what was going on in DC. So it was very confusing. So this is what can happen to you in a market is you get caught in the debate. Don't listen to their debate. Transcend it by seeing what's next. So the debate at the time, so I'm sitting in a class and the professor was a history professor, was talking about Voltaire and Voltaire's ability to see through the society in France. And she was like, well, let me think of an example today. And she said, George Will. And I got mad. She triggered me. And I'm like, he's a conservative. So I'm sitting in a class of everybody who's nodding, like, oh, yeah, George Will. And I'm like, no, he's an evil conservative. Um, and it's confusing to me because I understood the economics because I'd read so much about it. And I was like, yeah, that's smart. A little bit of pain for big gain later. Government can't figure out the economy. It's impossible. It's just got to crush it and let the business environments and interests and the markets function, but with regulation. So that made sense to me. And I'm like, why is everybody fighting over this? It's so simple. Because they were attached to their belief systems, identities, and constructed silos in the matrix. So they had a stake in it. I didn't have a stake in it. I was liberated from it because I'd never been in it because I screwed up when I was a kid, but not really. If I look back, I'm like, thank God. Thank God. I would have tried to become an investment banker or something. It would have been terrible for me. I know a guy who did it. He's got a big house in Evanston on the lake. And he's a great guy. We know his family, but it wasn't for me. So I'm in DC and I'm listening to this stuff. And then I'm going to AA meetings at the in Georgetown. Now Georgetown's basically a shopping mall. But back then Georgetown was cool. I saw Dizzy Gillespie at a jazz club. He was right in front of me. It was $20. Me and my friend Jody just were like, he's like, oh, Dizzy Gillespie's playing at this jazz at the Georgetown Jazz Club, or I forget what it was called. And I'm like, really? Like, let's go. We just bought tickets and went. You can't do that anymore. Well, he's dead, but so so the AA club, and I had a lot of friends there then. Now, economists, one guy ran a war in Africa for the State Department. I mean, people who worked in the CIA. One guy was a producer of Nightline with Ted Koppel, and I'm sitting around talking to these people, and I'm just some dumbass kid from GW that had zero credentials to do all the things I really wanted to do. Like, there's no way Georgetown Law School has let me in. I tried. There's no way London School of Economics has let me in. I tried. There's no way INSEAD. I went to Paris for a year. INSEAD's not letting me in. There's no way. I didn't have the credentials because I didn't do any work. I took classes that interested me. You don't do that to get into the matrix, into one of these tunnels where you get sucked up into a career path. So I'm on my own, like an entrepreneur. I didn't know I was an entrepreneur. So I'm watching what's going on. I was in another class where oh yeah, the Georgetown. Yeah. So I meet this guy at the AA club who was a professor at Georgetown. So we're having a debate. So he's telling me the Soviet Union is being misunderstood by the United States by Reagan because he hated Reagan because he believed in progressivism. Progressivism. So he had taken on a belief system about the world. And I saw it. I saw through it. But well, he's a genius professor. But I never believed it. So I argued with him. And I provoked him too because he was wrong and I knew it. So he's saying the Soviet Union and the United States, and he's going on, he's giving me all this bullshit, and I can't poke a hole in it. And I'm trying, and he just wouldn't stop. And I'm like, I can't talk to this guy anymore. I can't talk to him. And there was a communist socialist bookstore, and I'm reading Karl Marx in the park, which is, he needed an editor. It's impossible to read his stuff. But I'm like, there's something interesting in what he's saying. But I walk in the socialist bookstore and it's just this anti-Reagan hatred of Reagan stuff. And I'm like, well, I don't like it what he's doing either. But you're missing the point because you're stuck in your belief system. And I kept trying to explain this to people. No one wanted to hear it. So instead of doing that, I kept doing it, right? I kept doing it. I just tried to find different angles. So I would let them talk and then I try to figure out how do I get in there and find a weakness in their argument or something. What I've realized today is don't be involved, opt out. That's the opinion problem. Now, this happens in every market. Now, the conservatives had the same thing. So the conservatives in DC completely missed the point. Jack Kemp got it. So Jack Kemp said, capitalism fails if it doesn't help lift everybody. And I heard that and I'm like, yeah, that's right. You should have been elected president next. That would have been a good thing. Well, he was a radical in how he'd get there, which was let the market do it. I don't know. I'm not an economist. Why would I even have an opinion? All I know is I noticed that and I was like, oh, that makes sense as a principle. This is what I'm saying is look for what's always true, the principles. The principle was for an economy to work, it's got to work for everybody in it, not just the people at the top of it. Extracting money out of it and creating laws that help them take more money, like investment laws that let big real estate developers extract money. It's called crony capitalism. So the government is supporting special interests in the economy. Jack Kempsel, but that doesn't mean capitalism is bad. See, this debate makes no sense. So Jack Kemp's like, well, we can make capitalism work for everybody. Well, was he right or wrong? I don't know. It's called an experiment. That's an entrepreneur. We don't know. Milton Friedman at University of Chicago, they called it, I learned about this when I was in college. So it's the high school, and I studied it my whole life really, but so he's the Chicago School of Monetary Policy. So he's like, let the economy go. Everybody's like, we can't do that. That's scary. Well, it is because then you have massive change. Well, we got the change anyways. It happened anyways. Technology uprooted everything, crushed my family's business, retail industry business that I built up, crushed it. They crushed it. They crushed it. I call them financial bots and technology bots. So they brought a lot at the beginning, and then it became an ad network. That's Google. Or social media, same, connecting stuff, and then it became an ad network. So they're bots. They're extracting money out of the economic system up. Well, it tilts west into Silicon Valley. So they get the word entrepreneur label, but they're corporate entrepreneurs. Not all of them. I mean, Mark Andreessen's not a corporate entrepreneur, and then the guy who wrote, Chris Dixon, who wrote Read, Write, Own, he's not a corporate entrepreneur. They're way ahead in the zeitgeist of what's coming. The black swan is a new internet. Is it? I don't know. It feels right though, doesn't it? Because our internet sucks. Our technology sucks. It's terrible. It's hard to even watch TV. Used to be easy. You just turned on the TV and then the shows were there. Now you have better stuff, but you can't find it. So the promise of data, I remember this when I was selling AI. So it was intent-based connecting through data, through real-time connection with serving information based on the pattern of behavior of the user knowing exactly what they wanted. So the technology would know and learn and teach itself what that individual wanted based on one of the companies I work for did it based on this idea called wisdom of crowds. So what I'm talking about is what's next. So this isn't about tech and stuff. I'm using it to make the point because it's very philosophical and too confusing to explain. I've learned that the hard way. So in an economy, when you look at what's coming, you have to understand the people in the economy. That's key to seeing the zeitgeist because it's the energy of the people that's creating what's next. So people look at AI as AI's what's next, and I don't. What I see AI is more technology. And there's a debate now. Bad AI, good AI. Who cares? Those are just opinions and beliefs and convictions in silos of people who have an interest in being right. It could be an economic interest, it could be an identity interest, it could be a moral interest, it could be just confusion around beliefs and not understanding how they work. So people are stuck in a thought loop. That's what the mind does. It goes in circles. Answers are not in the mind because the mind goes in circles. You have to break the circles. I call it, I feel like when I did it, as I've been doing it, it's like, feels like breaking an old cassette tape. Because all of a sudden I heard I could see the thought pattern of the belief that I had taken on just, and I'm like, and I'm distancing myself from it. And I'm like, oh, that's bullshit. Where'd I get that from? And then I had to track it back. And I'm like, DC in the 80s. And I'm like, why are you believing that? I think it was Paul Krugman, the economist who writes the New York Times. And he said, stop debating about ghosts. And I'm like, oh, that's why you want to know about Price. And no, he's bad. He's a progressive. He's bad. Conservatives like, no, Paul Krugman, because they're stuck in the belief system. So I want to explain progressives and conservatives really quick and why it's important they're both in balance and harmony. And that being out of balance and disconnected and divided is the problem. That's the problem. It's starting to come back together. That's the black swan. It's a black swan. So it's obvious, but people don't see it because they're stuck in the debate of the minds, this side against that side. And it's exacerbated by people on social media who don't know what they're talking about, who are repeating a debate they don't even understand because they have no context or experience or education around the thing they're very opinionated about. And then you get the echo chamber where they're talking to each other because they don't want to get to the truth of anything because they don't want their beliefs challenged. They want an identity. They built an identity around, I'm a conservative or I'm a progressive and I think these things, and I'm a conservative and I think these things. Now, this is exaggerated, what I'm saying, but I'm just trying to give you the understanding of it as an entrepreneur so you can free yourself from it. Look at the energy that's coming. What's next? Artists do this. That's why Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, is so important for entrepreneurs. That book's not just for artists. And he says that at the beginning of the book. And I'm like, every entrepreneur needs to read The Creative Act. That's why I wrote an article about it. It's so important because we have to be in that creative energy like the artists are. What do artists do? They tell the society the truth, filtered through the experience of the artist who has honed their craft through a lifetime of pain. The pain is, the truth is in the pain. Artists know that. Entrepreneurs don't want to go into the pain because we want to go, let's make it happen. Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen. No, you got to sit there with it for a while and then go. The thoughts of what's next, what do I want? Why am I here? Self-awareness, attention at the same time leads to action and motion. You don't need a how-to program. Get in motion in the economy and the market you're in and say, what do I like here? What don't I like here? What's going on? Where do I fit? Where do they fit? And then most importantly, what do they believe? And when you see what they believe, you can start to see where all the confusion is and it gets really clear. So that's one of the things we work on yesterday in the market authority meeting. So if you're in the group, what we worked on yesterday with market authority was finding your lane in the confusion by separating out of it. by separating out of it and saying what resonates with me in terms of what I see coming, not my beliefs. Then you're just another belief person selling something, marketing something. You're marketing and selling your belief, like politically confused people are doing, and they're fighting it out in social media. It's idiotic, but it's how it's always worked in all societies. So I don't look at it as stupid. Well, it is stupid, but I look at it as just how it is. So I want to take advantage of that as an entrepreneur by not getting stuck in it, because most people are stuck in it. This is the idea of original thinking, of being in the moment. Now there's a deeper stuff under the iceberg of that, but let's not do that now. So entrepreneurs who live in the creative intelligence of the future, I'm reading my LinkedIn thing, creates one that matters. Be the change that you want to see in the world. That's it. So we talked about that in Market Authority yesterday, is what is the change? See this guy right here, Gandhi, expressive Gandhi. What is the change you want to be in the world? That's your marketing strategy. Be the change you want to see in the world as an entrepreneur leader, noticing in this zeitgeist. And you get there by being in it, taking action in it, and saying, this is for me, this is not for me, and allowing yourself to, not from a marketing standpoint, markets and marketing is different. We didn't get too much into that yesterday, but I'll do it next week in that session if you're in the group. Oh, you can claim a guest pass, by the way. That's my sales thing. This is as far as I go with sales today or ever. Claim your guest pass. Join us. redpillpathway.com/events. Now I did my infomercial. Here's my content. Now I threw in my little infomercial. I didn't use any persuasion techniques though. I'd like you to come. I think you'll get something out of it. I'm not going to charge you though, but I will if you decide to keep coming after 5 days. You can hang out for 5 days, as I don't do sales calls. Just come and join us. After 5 days, if you get something out of it, stay, but then you got to pay. But we constructed a way so you can get money to pay it if you don't have any money. Because I'm thinking, who creates what's next is often out of money. I guarantee you, if you're corporate and you plunge out into the coaching world, that 3, 4, 500 grand, that 1.2 million, it's going to go fast. You're not going to figure this out in 3 months. But with a group, you'll go a lot faster. And it'll be more fun. And you won't get as confused by the marketing stuff, which is opinions. Opinions. Do it this way. Do it that way. Do it my way. Most of the groups are like that. So you go in the group, you're getting advice. You're getting advice. What if the advice isn't right for you? Entrepreneurs don't need advice. Advice crushes my dream. Your opinion of what I'm doing, your expertise around what I'm doing, when you think I need to do what you did to be successful like you crushed my dream. That's what you did to me. It's happened many times. So I'm just going to keep going. I think I like on Fridays to get into something deeper. And this is important because we need you. Everything's broken. You noticed? Technology's broken, the healthcare is broken globally. Globally, the global systems are broken, the supply chains are broken. Entrepreneurs can see the fixes immediately, but then there's all this friction. So remember, you start with thought, then you go into connected action to thought, and then the last step is impact. What happens on impact? Think of the space shuttle. Comes back into the atmosphere, and there's some pretty serious friction. That's why they spend so much time on heat shields. You got to get the damn people home. I think going to outer space is the easy part. It's coming back that's difficult. Same with entrepreneurship. That's why I had 20, 30 years to overnight success, because you're stuck with all these people in the society that can't get out of their own confusion. You see it, your group. Okay, here's a secret weapon, the group. What if you were in a group of originals like you? Or you want to be an original and you're stuck and you're like, oh my God, I cannot go to one more stupid mastermind group, networking meeting, or event where everyone is sharing their opinions about what they believe. Because this one and this one did this and this one did that. They're talking about it. And then underneath it, there's all a, what do I get? thing. Well, this is what's next is the evolution past that. This isn't just me. I'm in the zeitgeist of what's next. And the zeitgeist of what's next is build it and they will come if they're visible. The belief system is you can't do that. No, if you build it, they won't come. It's not about the product, it's about the marketing. Larry Ellison teaches that. Larry Ellison was like, screw the product. The product will work itself out. Doesn't matter. It's the marketing. That's the belief system of the entrepreneur today. Well, that's changing. So it's not about the marketing today. It's the opposite because the marketing bots are everywhere. So nobody knows what to believe. I'm like, what do you want from me? The minute I could have a friend call me up and I'm like, what do you want? What do you want from me? People teach this stuff. Call every friend you've ever ever had and try to get something from them is what's really going on. And it's presented as service. Serve them and you'll get something back. That's called reciprocity. It's a persuasion principle, really. So I'm thinking, do you want to talk to me or do you want me on your podcast because you care about what I said? Or do you want me on your podcast because I'm in your avatar, your target market? This stuff isn't good or bad. It's what's been going on for a long, long time. Now we're in an age where people want to move on from that. I see it everywhere I look. People are like, God, I hate this technology. I spent all day doing tech support on something. I spent like an hour doing tech support on a cat litter box we bought called the litter robot. And luckily the cat didn't like it. So we went back to a low-tech litter box that cost $5. This thing was $1,000 and it had an app. It's controlled from the app. And I'm like, I can't get the damn thing to work properly. I'm doing tech support. And then I have to be with I'm like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. Some people spend the entire day trying to get the technology around them to behave. If Steve Jobs saw this, he'd turn over, he'd come back like Jesus, technology Jesus. And he'd fly into Silicon Valley and he'd say, turn off the AI for 5 minutes and let's get the technology right. And then we'll turn it back on. I was on Google yesterday and I'm like, this thing sucks now. It's so terrible. And then they threw all this AI on it to make it better. And it made it worse. Uh, I'm like, oh, how am I going to get information? Well, podcasts, long form content. YouTube is okay, but they can cancel people. And there's a lot of stuff on it that doesn't make any sense because the people don't know what they're doing. Or they had a success and they're trying to sell something to you, like their belief system, even though they're real and they had a success. So the evolution past this stuff is truth. It's so people are like, all right, what's next? Authenticity. And then somebody puts out a how to become authentic in 7 easy steps program on Instagram. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. This is the funniest thing I've ever seen. Um, so, so, you know, and I want to go to it and just say, huh, so how authentic are you? You're cringy first. It's cringy to watch you being authentic to get me to buy your stuff. That's cringy because you're marketing basically. So you're not really being authentic because you're not just doing an infomercial, you're pretending to give to the community in return for getting a client. Okay. All right. Think hard about this. So people are like, well, that's what you're doing, Larry. What are you talking about? I'm like, no, that's not what I'm doing because I'm not using persuasion. I'm not trying to trick somebody's mind using persuasion techniques to get them to do what I want. That's not authenticity. Authenticity is actually being yourself. It's sharing your heart. It's sharing a connection between your mind, which is right here. Your mind's right here, not this confusing thing swirling around. Thought and mind is a little different. And then you've got your heart, which is right here. And then you've got your guidance system, which is down here in the solar plexus area. These things connect and you got power in the marketplace because you're being yourself, because you're not in fear. The belief system people don't know they're in fear sometimes, but they're driven by unconscious motivations from their history. And they're projecting from their mind their belief system out into the world. And that's the hard part because they're doing it to you too. So they look at me, and one guy I was talking to, he's like, "Well, you're trying to sell me too." And I was like, "If I was trying to sell you, you would have bought already. I know how to manipulate you to buy from me. I've been doing it since I was 21 years old. I would get you to think my stuff would work for you, which it might or might not. But I can't do that anymore because I don't want to do that. I want to share my experience and be visible because that's what's next. And it feels right for me. Plus, it's what's coming. Why would I want to be using old technologies?" So, so going back to politics. So the idea of progress and conserve. So think of the world like a big, huge iceberg. It's a big, huge iceberg. Where's the iceberg? It's inside all the human beings in the world. There's a big iceberg inside all human beings in the world. And then from that iceberg, there is an experience being created constantly. It's like the Truman Show. So you're Truman, and you're also the guy up in the booth. And you're watching yourself have a life. So the whole society is creating this world we're in. And being in that illusion is very confusing because the mind is very confusing. That's the tapes. So the tapes are running. Well, step back from the tapes a little bit, give some space, watch the tapes, and you'll see what's going on in the world. And you'll say, "Oh, that's how that happened. That's why all those people are doing that over there." They think technology is going to solve all their problems. So they're speeding it up with AI. And then people will say, "Well, AI is good or AI is bad." And I'm like, no, don't have a debate about it. That's an opinion debate. Get an understanding through a scientific process of thinking of, I wonder what's happening. I don't know if that's happening or not. I wonder, is it possible that we're creating too much complexity that people don't like anymore? And AI will create even more complexity, but it'll simplify daily work processes. And that's useful. Maybe we're just using it wrong. So I hear a lot of debates about that. Again, you don't need to debate. It's not relevant. That's the whole point. Entrepreneurs aren't debating. We're creating. Being an original creator means creating what's next. It means thinking, what do I want to say? To who? And why does it matter? And then doing it. The friction comes back at you with everybody trolling and projecting. They're not jealous. You don't know what they are. You don't know what's going on because it's too complicated. Everyone's got their own inner iceberg thing. So the iceberg inside is where the truth is and all the information. In other words, your truth, your experience is inside you, inside me. Now, is this true or not? Yeah, it is. So these are principles. Like this is like, I'm not going to debate about whether gravity exists with you or anybody. I just say, oh, okay. And I'm going to move on. I don't want to have a conversation with people who want to debate things that are true. So this inner experience matters. How do I become myself? Pay attention to yourself and then allow people to project onto you. That's the hardest part. Because I'm like, they didn't understand what I said. What am I going to do? Let them not understand. And then next time, think about, can I make this more easily understandable using story vignettes or some anchoring device theatrically? And that I'm like, oh, that's easier. Let me do it like that. In other words, meet people where they are. If you meet people where they are in your marketplace, you don't have to sell them anymore because you're telling them the story of the market and it either resonates with them or it doesn't. This is the key because then you're attracting people into your world where you resonate with each other around a shared desire and you're not trying to squash theirs. to get them to believe in yours for them. And that's why my group is so different. So the Entrepreneur Campus is for independent free thinkers and entrepreneurs and coaches who want to help people, and service providers who just are really good at what they do and want to just do a good job and are able to sit back. And we have ways of doing this. And I learned them from groups like AA and men's retreats that I was on, where, people would be like, is that your, they'd say to me, stop saying we. And I'm like, why? They say, you sound like you're lecturing us. I said, but I'm not. They said, yeah, but we think you are. And I started saying, my experience is, or I've noticed this. It changed everything. When everyone in the room does that, it changes everything because the opinions are stripped out of the room. Some people don't like that because then they have to think about what they really believe. In other words, think and know. So they have to question their beliefs, think about what they know, and then deal with the implications of that, which is maybe my life's going in the wrong direction because I've been believing in stuff that's not true for me because it came from somewhere else. My family, my history, my karmic pattern. There's all kinds of places this stuff comes from. Generational traumas. It's very, very complex. That's why I know I don't know what's going on with anybody. I can't unless I ask. And I say, does that resonate for you, what I just said? Or what did you mean when you said this? Now you can have a real conversation. This is what we're doing. It changes everything. And it speeds up the time to success. So instead of 20, 30 years to be an overnight success, it can happen faster. And it's more fun because you're doing it with a group that understands you, because they're letting you be yourself and live in your confusion when you're in it. That's key. So let's go back to this idea of progress and conserve, because it's very important to make this work in a group. Because what happens is you're gonna have politically charged conviction coming into the group. So I'm thinking, how do I deal with this? I want people to be able to talk about politics. I want people to be able to say anything. Originals need to talk. Entrepreneurs need to talk. I need to be able to say anything and not have somebody get all upset. And I've been in those environments for so many years that when I'm in an environment that's not like that, it's confusing to me because I've been outside the matrix my whole life because I couldn't get in it. I couldn't find a pathway. So I had to keep creating my own all the time. So I got outside it. That's liberation. So I'm thinking about, okay, so yeah, we're talking about the iceberg. That's right. So at the bottom of the iceberg are archetypal principles. They're think of them like big tectonic plates that are just shifting around. So Plato called these forms. The forms manifest in the world in different ways in the society. And this is what Plato, I think, was talking about. So I don't know that. I'm not an expert in Plato, but this is what I think is true about Plato because I've read it enough. But I'm not an expert in Plato. I'm not a philosopher. I'm not a trained philosophy professor. I'm not an authority in this. It just makes sense to me based on my own experience. So what's going on is the two forms to conserve and to progress need to work in harmony for the society to function properly at the top of the iceberg. At the tip of the iceberg, the political realm, those tectonic plates need to move. Okay, we did this in the 80s. I saw it when I was in DC. Ronald Reagan, the conservative, was hated by the progressives. Hated the evil empire of Ronald Reagan. The evil empire was the Soviet Union. I tried to explain that to that progressive professor. I'm like, these people are evil. They're evil. It needs to go. Well, the United States was doing a lot of terrible things too, but it's different. He couldn't see that, despite all his education. And I didn't have any, really. I just took classes I liked. I couldn't explain it to him. He wouldn't listen. And we couldn't have a conversation. I couldn't learn from him because he was trying to get me to believe his beliefs. That's the problem. So that's what's going on the surface. So the plate of progress turned into a belief system about progression, progressivism. So that's a whole belief system. So the debate is about the belief system. when what matters is connecting into the plate underneath of progress. Entrepreneurs want progress. We want progress. We want to see the change. That comes up from inside and rolls out into the world as a company that transforms everything where it is. And it can be small. It has nothing to do with technology. That's the point. Technology, entrepreneurship, those words shouldn't connect like that. Technology is a tool used by entrepreneurs to transform and progress things based on this tectonic plate rolling out into the world in form. That's what Plato was talking about. Now, what's conserve? It's there too. It's another tectonic plate with progress. These things balance. These are dualities. They're opposites that turn into each other, and they need to flow. Flow is key. Flow. Conserve is okay, you're progressing a little too much or in the wrong way, or you're getting carried away, folks. Too much progress. This group over here can't handle that change. It's too much change for them. They live in West Virginia. They live in rural Indiana. They don't live in New York City or San Francisco. It's too much. So they're going to hold back, conserve. What is the impulse at the bottom of the iceberg? I know these people because I used to sell to them. That was my customers. I know people from the inner city. I know people from small town red states. I know people from the wealthy suburbs of the blue state. Those were all my customers years ago. So I know these communities. I've been in them, been to dinner with these people, hung out with them. I needed their business. So I know what's going on. I could see it underneath the political debate and confusion and belief systems. So what was going on in the conserve is this change doesn't feel right to me. You're crushing me. My businesses are going away. I know I can't. What am I going to do? I can't live here. What am I going to do? Move to San Francisco? I don't want to live in that place with all those progressives. Well, you shouldn't. You want to be in rural Indiana, in your community that you love. We should be able to. So the problem is, and this is the Jack Kemp idea. So conserve means don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The progressing energy doesn't want to do that because it wants to integrate with the conserving energy in fluid motion. So let's go up to the top of the iceberg in DC. You had Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill. Tip O'Neill from Boston. Who could be more different than Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill? Democrat, Irish, Boston, liberal, establishment, back office stealing, cigar smoking, let's get her done guy. Speaker of the House. A true, beautiful example of a politician that gets it. Political skills are important. People are like, oh, I hate the politician. That's because they're bad politicians. So what Tip O'Neill do, they're not good at their jobs. So Tip O'Neill was great at his job. So he could sit with Ronald Reagan and they could hash it out. Why? They could come together. Around what? We live in the same world. So they found common ground. And then Ronald Reagan would be like, well, I'm not going there. That conflicts with my agenda and my values. Tip O'Neill would be like, no, I'm not going there. That conflicts with my agenda. Instead of fighting over the values, they figured out, how do we work together? Behind closed doors. This is what politicians have to do. Do it behind closed doors. You can let the press in and leak it to them. If you have relationships with good journalists, that's how it works, right? So one of the joys of my life in DC was to read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and watch Charlie Rose and the McNeil era News Hour every day. I was a maniac. I couldn't get enough of that journalism, real journalism, because they're there. The journalists are hovering, observing and watching these games. And unlike in Nixon and Kennedy administrations, they started realizing we're not letting them lie to us anymore. We're going in there. Well, they went too far, right? So that's the balance. That's a different tectonic plate. But let's keep it simple. So progress and conserve. So progress and conserve when it balances, solves the problems because the wings of people who are stuck, like in the convictions of no, not letting a conservative in this room, or no, not letting a progressive into my town. Those people are ruining everything. um, they can get them in line a bit, or at least marginalize them so they don't take over everything, which is what's happened. So when you have this divide and split, the entrepreneurs in the creative energy of connection, because creative energy is always connecting, because it's moving things together. It's moving conserve and progress together to go forward. Together to go forward is key. Very important. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're in a marketplace, look at the progress and conserve impulses, and you'll start to know what's happening if you look from below the iceberg up to the top, and you'll say, oh, that's why they're doing that. So this group over here is trying to force change, and this group over here is trying to resist change in a very specific domain, like healthcare or government or in a company or even in a department in a company, because individuals have balancing of progress and conserve tectonic plate energy at their core. So it's all good. So if someone's conserve instinct, they're there for that reason. They're trying to help the system not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, don't screw everything up. Don't destroy the local economy to globalize the capitalist market system. That's what happened. And people who live in small towns are like pissed. They should be. You screwed up their life style. I should say, screwed up. So, this is a problem. This has got to get balanced out. Who's going to do this? Entrepreneurs, not technology corporate entrepreneurs. They got to get reined in, but real entrepreneurs. And some of them are masters of technology, like a Mark Andreessen kind of person. But in Naval, people like this, they just get it because they get what I'm talking about. At least I think they do. They must. They must be in these principles in the way they function. That's why they're so successful. So if I look at what's going to work for us, I get it. That's all you have to ask yourself. What will work for us? What is us to you? For me, it's entrepreneurs who want a better experience of self-employment as entrepreneurs, so they realize their vision with less struggle, effort, and challenge and friction, get out of the matrix of all these opinions and confusion in the marketplace, and coaches who don't want to become marketers or salespeople. They just want to help people. How can those people do that successfully and not run out of money? Because a lot of coaches don't make any money and they're great at the gift they have to heal and help people. And they don't make any money because they're trying to become marketers. And then the third is the service providers. So I've owned a lot of service companies. Well, I own a service company, my passive income company, and I've worked in a lot of service companies. And I know from being an account exec and a business developer and then a CEO of a service company is all you want are good clients that let you do your work. And when you market to pain, you attract a lot of bad clients that won't let you do their work because their pain becomes your pain because they want it to be. They want you to take their pain away from them. And what we tell people with my other company is it's a revenue generation company, is we're like, you're not going to make any money in this period of time. You okay with that? I had a boss years ago when I was selling services. He's like, you're not going to make me money for a year. And in the second year, you're going to make me $1 million in revenue. And I did it. He was right. Because he said, just do this, this, and this. And I said, okay. He didn't tell me how. I had to get on the phone and make 100 cold calls like every day or so. Like it wasn't, but it was like brutal. Like it was pushing a boulder up a hill. But I succeeded in the way he said because he'd seen it before. He'd done it himself. He'd been around it enough. And the industry was there where those systems were working. So he's like, just do it. And he knew I had the talent and the tenacity to do it. And he didn't have to babysit me. I didn't need mindset coaching. I mindset coached myself. All right, I got to go to a meeting. And then anybody who wants to come in an hour, I think it is, look at the schedule on the events page. I'll see you in the Action Library on the campus.